Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Catholic Truth Podcast. My name is Bryan Mercier, president of Catholic Truth, and today we're going to be talking about NFP, natural family planning. And this is a big topic that, one, not a lot of Catholics know about. You know, they think natural family planning is like the rhythm method, and that was like a 1970s outdated thing that didn't really work that well to space out kids. And natural family planning is actually completely different. And then there's other people who think that it's just birth control, under a Catholic name. So today we're going to be discussing about it. We already did a whole show on birth control and why the church considers it not only intrinsically evil, but why and how it harms women. But this is the opposite of that. This is how it helps women, empowers women, makes women healthy, and actually makes families stronger. So NFP is incredible. And today we have an expert to talk about this topic with us, and she's been a guest on here before. Her name is Grace Emily Stark. We've already established that there's no relation to Tony Stark, and she is a writer and an editor. She holds a master's degree in bioethics and health policy, and she's written for countless magazines and journals. She's the editor-in-chief of Natural Womanhood, which I highly recommend everybody check out, and I will put the link to that website and everything she does below. And she's also a mom of 4 kids, has a wonderful husband, lives in Texas, all around great person. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bryan, and thanks for that. That was a kind introduction.
You are very welcome. And I want to apologize to anyone and everyone because I'm super sick. But here I am anyways, persevering.
Pushing through.
Amen. I gave a parish mission in Missouri and I came home, and I don't usually get sick on planes, but I sometimes do. And apparently this time I did, and I've been sick since. So got to get ready because I go to Alaska at the end of the month to give another parish mission.
Oh, wow. That's a long
Yeah.
way to go.
But anyways, yeah, I want to talk about NFP today, natural family planning. People always wonder, well, obviously the Catholic Church says you can't use birth control. What do they expect you to have, like 30 kids? But the Catholic Church doesn't teach that you have to have 30 kids, doesn't teach that you have to have as many as possible. And it doesn't teach that you have to try to have a kid every time you have sex. Like that's not the only purpose of sexual relations. And so the Catholic Church has introduced NFP, which is different than the rhythm method. And maybe you can talk about some of this, just like an introduction to get us started.
Sure. Yeah. I think the best way to get started is with an analogy, and I've used it before. And I actually didn't come up with it. And I forget who did, but all credit where it's due to whoever came up with this analogy. But the rhythm method is to modern methods of natural family planning as like Jerry Seinfeld's car phone in, the TV series Seinfeld is to the iPhone in your pocket today. So we can see the evolution, right? But to say that Jerry Seinfeld's car phone is the same thing as an iPhone, it's woefully mistaken, right? And that's kind of what folks are doing when they say, oh, NFP, that's just the rhythm method. It doesn't work. And really where the rhythm method came about, and it's even older than the 70s, you mentioned in your intro, the 70s, but it's been around since like kind of the 40s, 50s, because we've known about the science of kind of the cyclical nature of women's fertility since the early 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. It was discovered that women had biomarkers that were indicative of when they were actually fertile. So we first started learning about this thing called cervical mucus, and how it kind of changed in a very particular way. There was a pattern that could be seen over the course of a woman's cycle. There was I think an Austrian,
or like when she's
yes,
fertile or not.
exactly. So I think there was an Austrian researcher, a Japanese researcher who kind of discovered around the same time. It was either about cervical mucus or basal body temperature. I can't remember which right off the top of my head, but there was all this research going on in the early 1900s all over the world about women's cycles. And we found kind of within the span of a few decades that women had cervical mucus secretions. So when you go to the bathroom and you wipe and you see what's on the toilet paper, there's some stretchy stuff, some clear stuff, cloudy stuff, tacky stuff, just depending on where you are in your cycle. And then also women's body temperature changes based across her cycle as well. So we know for a fact that after we ovulate, our basal body temperature, so the temperature of our bodies at rest, actually goes up by a measurable amount. and stays elevated until you start your period. And then it drops back down. Or if you're pregnant, it stays elevated and continues to stay elevated. So kind
which
of
is
think of it.
crazy. Like the
Yeah.
fact that you can look at, just this moisture on a piece of toilet paper
Yep.
or your body temperature and know whether you can get pregnant or not. Whether
Yeah.
like if you had relations that day, I would be pregnant just by looking at these markers, or
Yep.
I know I won't be just by looking
Yep.
at these markers. That's
Exactly. Yep. And it's incredible. And it's all based in science. And so in like the 40s or 50s, there was I believe, a Catholic doctor, a gynecologist in the Chicago area who developed the rhythm method just off the idea that women ovulate roughly in the middle of their cycles. And he kind of did some calculations about well, if women have 28-day cycles and they ovulate around the middle, so say about day 14, then, we can tell women that day, 8 through 16, 17, based on the average length of her cycle, is likely to be fertile. And so as long as you don't have sex during that fertile window, you're fine. And it's really been maligned as being not very effective, when in truth, it is actually about as effective as condoms are, in like a typical use. Typical use of condoms is only about like 70-ish something
really true.
percent,
Yeah.
because people don't use them correctly, and accidents happen all the time. And so actually the rhythm method was about as effective in typical use as condoms are today. But it was really, really maligned as being totally ineffective. And
Which is ironic because they don't look at their own birth control, which is ineffective many times.
right, exactly. But fortunately, what we have today is even better than the rhythm method because it's not based off of just kind of your average cycle length and kind of guessing where you might ovulate in there.
And
It's
I think
based
that's,
off,
if you don't mind me saying, I think that's
yeah,
part of the problem is they expected women in general to have 28-day cycles, which is true,
exactly.
28, 29
Yep.
days. But if you're
Hmm.
like my wife, who had many issues and she had 40, 50, 60, 80-day cycles till she saw an NFP doctor and got completely fixed,
Yep.
and brought back down to 28 days, we would have had like 30 babies based on that rhythm
Yeah.
method because not everybody has 28
Or
days.
none at all, because that can be indicative of the fact that you're not ovulating, actually. And so if you're not ovulating, you can't get pregnant. And so we'll get into that a little bit more later on. But so modern NFP methods, so I'm talking, the Creighton method, the Marquette method, the symptothermal method is taught by the Couple to Couple League, at least here in the United States. These methods are based on real-time data. We're not making predictions based off of where we think you might ovulate during your cycle. If you're taught to read these biomarkers, so your cervical mucus secretions and what the texture and color of it means in regards to your fertility, and your basal body temperature with the symptothermal method, you can know when you're ovulating or thereabouts within a few days when you are ovulating. There's no guessing involved. And so that's where we see now that modern methods of NFP are within a really, really tight range of efficacy, comparable and even better than that of birth control. So the birth control pill with typical use, so how people use it every single day, which accounts for the fact that some people won't take it at the same time every day, which you have to do for it to be, 99% effective, 98% effective. Typical use accounts for the fact that sometimes people will miss a dose, sometimes people will delay a dose. It's really actually only like 90 to 92% effective, with typical use, the birth control pill. And that's how we all know somebody who got pregnant while on the pill, right?
I know
So it
lots
does
of people
fail.
multiple times.
Yep. And so it does fail. And that's, part of the reason why. And NFP, particularly the symptothermal method, which utilizes cervical mucus and basal body temperature.
That's the one we used.
Yep. It's the most effective. And with, even with typical use, it's like up near 96, 97% efficacy. And with perfect use is 98 to 99% effective. So when you do everything right. So those are really good rates. And the other methods, Billings, Creighton, those are going to be more in like the, 92, 93, 94% with typical use. up higher with perfect use. And so they're comparable absolutely to the efficacy of birth control. Not quite as effective as the IUD because that's a set it and forget it type of method. And we see closer rates to like 98, 99% effectiveness, and perfect and typical use are more closely related with that because you don't have to remember to take something every day. It's up in there and you can't do anything about it. But so these methods are really effective is the bottom line, and they don't come with any of the side effects that birth control does, obviously. And it actually brings couples together to use them because with birth control, the onus is on the woman. You have to remember to take your pill at the same time every day. You have to make sure if it feels like your IUD is not positioned correctly, that you go get that checked out, and get a new one when your current one is expired. Like it's all on you as the woman.
And
Birth
it's the
control was
woman
supposed
who
to
has
like
all the side effects too.
exactly. It was supposed to free women, but really what it did was make them solely responsible for protecting against childbearing, right? Protecting against conception. And last I checked, it kind of takes two to make a baby, two to tango, that sort of thing. So the fact that women got saddled with all of the responsibility and all of the side effects, you tell me how that's freeing, right? Um, NFP on the flip side, because we already did a whole episode on birth control and how bad it is. So if you want to hear more of my thinking and my ranting on that, I encourage you to go check out that episode. But this is the NFP episode. So the flip side of all the bad stuff with birth control is what the church offers and what science offers. And that is natural family planning, oftentimes also called fertility awareness methods or fertility awareness based methods of family planning. And so both couples are responsible, right? Because if you have decided at the beginning of this cycle, what your intentions are, like, are we avoiding conception this cycle? Are we trying to get pregnant this cycle? Or are we just kind of open to whatever God wants? And you have that conversation, and it's up to the two of you when ovulation comes around and you're both feeling a little bit more like you want to have sex because that's how God made our bodies. We want to have sex when we're ovulating as women. It's up to the two of you to decide, are we going to stick to what we decided? Or are we going to throw caution to the winds? But it's really on the both of you in a way that we just don't see with birth control. And it makes that family planning discussion a regular part of a married couple's life. It's not, well, she's on the pill, so we're not going to think about it until she decides she wants to get off of it, or she has the IUD, so we don't really have to talk about any of this. No, you have to make this decision. You have to talk these things out every month. And what we see is that this opens up lines of communication between couples that probably wouldn't get discussed if you were contracepting, right? Because family planning decisions are the absolute most intimate discussions that a couple can have. And when you're talking about whether or not you want to try for a baby that month, it's not binary. It's not just, do we want a baby or not? It's, are we open to having a baby, conceiving a baby? And if not, why not? And so then we start discussing, well, what do our finances look like? What does our health look like? How are you feeling about your work, about our family stability, the goals that we have? There's all these different threads of family life that
You
get
just had
woven
two
in.
kids. Can you really do another one? Are you emotionally at your wit's end right now?
Exactly. And so talking about health, mental health, all these things go into these discussions. And that is really, really powerful for married couples to have that monthly reminder of like, where are we? Let's check in on all of these things because we have to decide, what are we doing this month when ovulation time comes around, when my fertile window comes around. And it just trains couples to see fertility for what it is, which is a shared endeavor, right? It's not my fertility and your fertility, it's our fertility, because I can't
Right.
make a baby on my own
And I
and you
think that's
can't
a
make
good
a
point.
baby on your own.
That's a really
And
good point.
yeah, and so it's that, we are one flesh, right? When we get married, we become one flesh. And so NFP really brings it home for couples that that's the reality of married life and marital intimacy.
And I think the opposite is also true with people who are on birth control. I don't know where I heard this. Maybe you don't agree with it, but I heard
Mhm.
that someone, just putting a woman on birth control is kind of like, it's like neutering a dog or a cat. It's like you just neuter them. You just make it possible so they can't have babies, but where's the intimacy, and where is the marital depth? Like, I think, who was it? Janet Smith, who once said that, usually you put barriers between you and other countries when you're at war, like, but we're
Yeah.
doing that during the most intimate relations we have,
Yeah.
and saying, I
Yeah.
give you all of me, but not all of me, not my fertility, not everything.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think just, in a sense, neutering them is the complete opposite of what you're talking about with this loving, respectful conversation, more mature conversation of where we're at. Yes, we might
Yeah.
want to space out kids, but we're doing it together, right?
Yeah. Yep. And there is that intimacy when you can talk this way and when you can think this way about what all is encompassed by the marital embrace when you come together as man and wife, right? And it's not, I'm going to withhold this part of me, give you all of me, but this part I'm going to hold back. Two, what I think is really powerful that doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that it it gives the intimate life of marriage a really beautiful rhythm. And what I mean is that men and women have different libidos, right? Men are kind of like the on switch, whereas women, there's a lot more that goes into whether we're ready for sexual intimacy, and it fluctuates over the course of a month. Our hormones have a lot to do with it, not everything, but a lot. And so I think for women, I can understand where I hear comments from women who are contracepting, um, who really, who really seem to disdain having sex with their husbands, for whom it's a chore, for whom it just feels like one more thing they're just expected to kind of have to do in this role as wife and mother. And I think you see this in Protestant circles, to be frank, where contraception has been accepted as this just like universal good. Um, I don't hear those kinds of attitudes from my Catholic sisters who utilize NFP. We have a very different understanding of sex. It's not available to us all the time, and it's not available to our husbands all the time. So there's a temperance there, and there's more of a reverence that comes with sex, and there's more of a desire that when we are able to engage in it, we're more enthusiastic about it because it's not just on the menu of options we can do every evening, right? If you're contracepting, sex is technically always on the table. And that can feel like a lot of pressure, especially for women, who have a libido, normally, if you're not on the pill, that fluctuates. And so if it's just another item on the menu of things that you can do every evening, it doesn't really feel all that special. And in fact, for a lot of women, and we see this in marriages, it can actually start to feel more like a chore. And I don't quite see that same mentality with Catholic women who use NFP. And again, I think it's because we can't have sex all the time, and our husbands can't have sex all the time. And so when we are able to engage, it's something that we're a little bit more excited about. The absence makes the heart grow fonder thing is really, really true. And especially if you have these seasons of NFP where, you have a long dry spell because you're postpartum and your cycle hasn't returned yet. And so you're getting signs and you're wondering and you really don't want to get pregnant. So you're just abstaining for a long time. It feels really wonderful to finally be able to have sex again with the person that you love most, that you're most attracted to in the world. And it's just, there's this temperance that really kind of breeds a reverence for sex.
And I think
Um,
I think it's a forced temperance sometimes.
it can
Like
be, absolutely.
NFP isn't. Oh, I think it's more forced for the guys, but it's in a good way. It creates a
Yeah,
guy to be more virtuous.
it's virtue
Um,
building.
like a
Yes.
guy probably wants to have sex more often than he can, but with NFP, he can't more than he wants to.
Yep.
And so it actually helps, while it's really hard sometimes,
Yep.
not going to lie, it actually makes the relationship better. It
Yeah.
makes it stronger and it makes both sides more virtuous because both sides need to learn to love each other in
Yeah.
other ways that are just sexual. And
Yeah.
it's easy for a guy to say, oh, you know what? I'm just loving my wife. I'm so good at loving her. And we're communicating and we're just having sex all the time. Whereas the woman's like, I don't feel like we're communicating at all. I don't feel
Yeah.
intimate at all. It's like,
Yeah.
we need, it's really important to learn to love each other. And there's these designated times where you need to learn to love each other
Yeah.
in ways that aren't sexual. And that only deepens
Yeah.
your bond, deepens your love, and makes the sexual expression even better when you do use it because it's being done for the right reasons, not just to
Yeah.
scratch an itch or, get something out or other ways like that. But I know for myself, my wife and I have had to talk about it. Every morning she had to take her temperature and I had to wake up with her and mark the temperature. I don't have to, but that's what they told you to do in NFP. So it's not all the woman's responsibility. The guy
Yeah.
has to share in it. So I did. And I kept the chart and I measured it going up. And I could tell when it shot up when she was ovulating and then when it dropped drastically when she wasn't fertile anymore, and I could tell that. And it really got, it really helped me to get to know my wife's body and
Yeah.
her as a person more. And I think that really helped us together as a couple, even though an NFP is really challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
And and it's really hard sometimes. I think it's really beautiful as
Yeah.
opposed to the alternative.
Yeah. It really has a way of, as anything that's worthwhile and virtue building, of stripping a lot of things away. I had a really great conversation with Emily Stimson Chapman on all of this on the Natural Womanhood podcast that I encourage folks to listen to. But um, she said something that really stuck with me. That she said, when I hear people talk about how much they hate NFP and how awful NFP is, when you talk about it a little bit more with them, it's not actually the NFP that's the problem. It's your vices that are the problem. And yeah, it hurts to see those things laid bare and to do the hard work of stripping them away. And it's something that you'll probably have to work at the entirety of not your marriage, because there is a window in which women are fertile and beyond which they are not. You hit menopause and these things are not a concern anymore. There are other concerns, but for the entirety of your fertile life together, this is something you're going to be working at. So into, your early 50s, probably, as a married couple.
And I can
And
speak from experience, just as a guy, like
mhm,
my wife hit phase one right on our honeymoon. So we couldn't do anything like anyways, it's like, what? And that was like super disappointing. And it was like already that reality check, like you don't get
yeah,
what you want. And then there's just times where like you want to, but then you realize, the chart says this and you're like, you can't.
yeah,
Or oops, I just hit phase three. We were supposed to have relations tonight. We had a date night set up and we were all ready with candlelight dinner and everything. And then, oops, now I'm back in phase one again. It came a day early, and it's like most guys are literally crushed. They've been looking for it forever. And it's like
yeah,
at the beginning,
yeah,
it's like, oh, stay, it's like you literally, it's like it forces you to be purged of,
yeah,
what you want.
it does.
But over the years, I found myself like, you know what? If I need that to love my wife, then am I really loving her? Or is it more about me? And so it's like when those phase three, or I should just say those disappointing times came, I would be like, you know what? That's fine. And I would give her a kiss on the cheek. And I said, I still love you anyways, like, let's still go on a date. Let's still have a wonderful night. Like, and I would choose to love her anyways. And that's what love is. It's a choice. It's not
Yeah,
sex. Sex is
yeah.
an expression of love.
And those times when you can't engage and but you're still trying to be romantic and you're still showing your love in other ways, just really kind of, for women especially, we see that, and it builds up our, kind of our tank, like, and it makes us more willing to engage when sex is on the table again. It makes us more enthusiastic. And I think if you asked any married man who loves his wife, what would you rather have? Sex all the time where your wife is just kind of going through the motions, or sex less often, but your wife is really enthusiastic about it? What man who really loves his wife is going to choose A? You know, you're going to choose B. And even if you want to choose A, I think you kind of recognize, like, oh, that's a fault in me. And that's me not loving my wife well. And that shows that I have some work I need to do on myself. And so and I think too, on the flip side for women, when you're trying to not get pregnant, that means that you can really only have sex during phase 3. So that's after you've ovulated and pregnancy is no longer possible.
Right. There's 3 phases, just so people know, like
Yep.
the first phase, and then the fertile phase, and then the non-fertile
Yeah.
phase.
And so if you're really, really trying hard not to get pregnant, some couples will only have sex during phase 3. So after you've confirmed that ovulation has happened. And so we know pregnancy is no longer possible until after you have your next period. And there's some dying to self there for women too. This is not all dying to self for men. And that phase 3 is when you as a woman have the lowest libido of your entire cycle. And so you might not feel super in the mood
You won't.
during the only phase when you're able to have sex. And so for women, there's that setting aside of like needing to feel amorous, that like, no, this is the only time we can do this. And it's important and it builds up our marriage. And so I'm going to get my head in the game a little bit and we're going to do it. And I've been in those situations. Every woman who uses NFP has been in those situations. And it's just the reality of our hormones. And it's wonderful because you usually don't regret it. You at the end of it, you think, what, that was right. That was good that we did this. And in seasons where you are trying to have a baby, it makes being able to have sex when your libido is high really awesome. So, but these aren't things that you can really appreciate about yourself, about your spouse, about marriage, unless you are living this cyclical reality of fertility together as a couple. Because if it's all just fertility is off all the time, which is what birth control does, right? Default is off for fertility. Then none of this is your reality. Nothing I'm saying would make any sense to you right now, right? But if default is on, which it has been up until 5 minutes ago in terms of human history, right? The pill came about in the 1960s, which is really 5 minutes ago.
Destroyed the world.
The reality was that fertility was always on. There was no default off. And so we can see where this idea of fertility as default off has really, really warped our perceptions about our bodies, our perceptions about sex and what it's for, and what it means to have sex as a married couple. And so NFP really restores that. It restores the default setting, right? On our bodies, on our hearts, on our minds. Not that that's easy.
In a
And
controlled way, not in an
yeah,
unfettered
yes.
way.
And so there's really a lot of good and a lot of beauty there if you can open your heart to it and if you can be willing to the purifying fire that it is, frankly, at times. So, because
Yeah, I
I
highly
never want to be
recommend it
one
to
to
everyone.
yeah, and I don't want to be one to paint it as like this rosy thing.
Right,
I think for a long time, our approach to promoting NFP was that, I'm sure you can remember a pre-Cana speech by the NFP couple that was like, oh, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's the best thing for your marriage, and it's going to make everything awesome. But then, like you said, you go on your honeymoon and it's like, wait, we can't even have sex on our honeymoon? This sucks. I hate this. Why are we doing this again? And so I don't want to be the one to talk about it with rose-colored lenses because it's not always that. But like anything worth doing, anything virtue building, it is worth it in the end.
And it makes your
Absolutely.
marriage way better as opposed to destroying your marriage through the other means.
Right.
Um, we can come back to this, but I'd like, I was thinking like people don't even know, like this NFP stuff cured my wife who had up to like 99-day cycles. No doctor could fix her. They couldn't diagnose all her pains and her issues. And then we met NFP doctors who are world miracle workers who can fix, like women's cycles and without birth control. They can regulate women's cycles without birth control, without all the side effects. They can deal with PCOS and endometriosis and all these other things without hacking a woman up and actually make them fertile again when they probably would never be.
Yeah.
And these doctors know so much more, but just knowing NFP, and this is what I want you to talk about, but just knowing NFP makes people, it makes women, it makes families healthier. Like
Yeah.
I know women who discovered they had diseases
Yeah.
just by
Charting.
knowing their body in their
Yeah.
mucus and different
Yep.
things like that. And it saved their life. And
Yep.
most people don't realize this is a whole entire holistic way of helping a woman and the family.
Yeah, NFP recognizes that a woman's cycle is her fifth vital sign, right? So we have the vital signs that they check if you call an ambulance, for an emergency. They check your heart rate, they check your breathing, they check, your temperature, and I forget what the other two are, or the other one is. So there's four key vital signs, but arguably a woman's cycle is her fifth vital sign because if we know kind of the state of the health of her menstrual cycle, that can tell us loads about the health of the rest of her body. Because as women, our cycles impact everything. It impacts our brain development, our bone health and development, our breast health and development, cervical health and development, like everything. It touches everything. And so that's why when birth control just shuts all that off, why do we see all these, like, you've probably heard the different side effects that women on birth control have. They have like their stomachs hurt all the time. They've got IBS like symptoms. They've got mental health problems. They've got all sorts of seemingly like disparate, wide ranging things. And you're like, why does birth control do that if it just impacts a woman's cycle? And it's because a woman's cycle impacts everything about her health. And so if you shut it off, you're going to have a lot of bad things going on all over the body. And in the same way, if your cycle is not healthy, if you're not ovulating and menstruating regularly, there's going to be other things off in your body too, because we need our cycles. Fertile women, so women pre-menopause and post-puberty, need our cycles for healthy living. You need a good, healthy cycle to be a healthy, happy, and whole woman. And we've been lied to for generations that it's something you can shut off and it does nothing else to your body. And we've also been lied to and told, the only thing that you can do for those painful periods and in everything else that you're experiencing is to go on birth control. And then that just shuts your cycle off. And so
And for the record,
doctors,
we talked about this in our previous video on birth
yeah,
control. If anyone's interested, do you know those commercials where it says, "Oh, take this, it'll make you better." Oh, but side effects include possible blindness, death, respiratory heart, like all this stuff. And it's like, I feel like that's like birth control too. It's like
it
we
is.
did the
Yeah.
longest list of all the side effects and really toxic things that birth control does to a woman's body rather than freeing her, it makes her a slave.
Yep.
And so I just want to point that out, that if you want to know all the possible horrible things like cancerous, like
Yeah.
mental health, depression, all of it, check out that video. Sorry to,
Yeah.
just wanted to get that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so doctors who understand the reality that a woman's cycle is her fifth vital sign. So doctors who have been trained in something called naprotechnology or FEM or even NEO, which is out of Dublin, Ireland. These are doctors who have medical protocols for looking at a woman's chart, being able to determine things about her cycle health and therefore her overall health based on her cycle charts, and actually get her real help for things like endometriosis, PCOS, uterine fibroids, adenomyosis, all of these different things that affect women and not only affect your cycle but also cause infertility or cause recurrent miscarriage or cause all the different pains that you have, or if you have PCOS, the hair growth on your chin and all the wacky things that you can get with PCOS and endo. So the doctors who understand the wisdom that is contained within a woman's cycle, the knowledge and what it's telling them, um, are incredible. And most of them are Catholic. And a lot of other doctors poo-poo this because they think we have the pill. Why would you go any deeper
They get
than
so much
that?
money from just recommending the pill. It's literally
Yeah,
as
and
I said, our last one,
IUDs
they
and
have
yep,
one tool in their toolbox.
yep.
Your toe hurts, here's birth control. You have an
Well,
irregular cycle, here's birth control.
they have two tools because if you are having these issues and you don't want to get pregnant, it's birth control. If you're having these issues and you want to get pregnant, it's IVF. So those are their two tools, neither of which
Fix the
actually
woman's problem.
addresses the root cause of anything going on in your body at
Exactly.
all. IVF is not infertility treatment. IVF circumvents what's causing the infertility to force a pregnancy.
When in fact, you could get pregnant on your own if you just went to the NFP doctors in most cases.
For a lot of women and men, yes. Not all of them.
Yes,
It's
no.
not a silver bullet. There are some structural abnormalities that can happen. There's a really rare complication of being a cystic fibrosis gene carrier as a man, where you are born without vas deferens. So you shoot blanks, as they say.
Right.
And so NFP can't help you. NAPRO can't help you. That's a cross that you will have to carry, and that is it's tragic. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. So it's not going to be the silver bullet for everyone. If you're a woman who had your tubes tied, had them removed, whether it was for sterilization purposes or for some kind of therapeutic purposes, I don't know. NFP is not going to help you. And yeah, IVF would technically be the only way you could possibly have a biological child.
Well, we talked about all the horrible things that does to women and families and everything on
Yes.
another show, because that's not a good alternative. Actually,
No, it's not. But I just don't want to give people the impression that NAPRO and NFP are the silver bullet for every single situation.
No,
I do think
it's
they
not.
are for a lot
But for a large
of
majority,
women.
I think it could help a lot of
Yes.
people. Like
For a lot of women, getting to the root cause of your infertility, seeing infertility for what it is, which is often a symptom, not a disease in itself, but a symptom of an underlying issue, whether it's hormonal, whether it's something like endometriosis, where you've got scar tissue blocking your tubes. There are things that doctors who are trained in NAPRO and FEM and NEO can do to make it so that conception can happen naturally, the way that it was meant to, through the marital embrace. And that's really beautiful. And I wish more couples knew about that. I especially wish more Catholics knew about that, because even Catholics think, when they're told that they have infertility, that the only thing that they can do is do IVF. Right. And that's not true. And IVF will actually probably make you more unhealthy because of the drugs they have to put you on. So you pop out, 24 eggs at once, which is not natural. It'll make you more unhealthy, and it'll come with all the other ethical and moral issues that, we won't get into right now. But getting healthy, addressing the root cause of your cycle issues is going to make you healthier overall, your husband healthier overall if the issues stem from his side of things. It's going to and improve your health and fertility in the process, and hopefully make it so that you can conceive the natural way, the way that God intended us to. And so that's another really crucial benefit of NFP that not enough people understand, not enough Catholics understand. And so you might be listening to this and thinking, I don't need to use NFP. We're just open to life all the time. We don't need to kind of cloud our openness with any of this information. But what happens when you can't get pregnant and you want to get pregnant? NFP would help you with that. Understanding your body, which is what it is at its core, can help you have the children that you desire. It's not just about spacing children, although you can do that too with NFP, but it's also about actually allowing you to have the family that you want to have. And so ignorance of the body is ignorance of God's design for the body. Isn't that something you should want to know more about? Isn't that something you should want to understand more about yourself, about your wife, about the marital embrace? And so I think for a lot of people who think, oh, it's just Catholic birth control, I don't want to have any part of that, we're just open to life all the time, they're not seeing the flip side of the planning of children, of the postponing of children. They're not seeing that it actually is what can allow couples to get pregnant when they want to. And if they want to, if they're struggling. So I just always have to put in that plug.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me saying so, my wife, I think I said earlier that she had a 99-day cycle at times, sometimes 40, sometimes 60. It was a mess. And no doctor, no secular doctor could fix her. They all just want birth control to regulate the cycle, which doesn't actually fix the problem. It just puts a Band-Aid on an axe wound. Mm-hmm. And not to mention like 7 years of doctor appointments to figure out stomach pains, which kept her up every single night, crying. And she went to an NFP doctor who just looked at her chart, looked at her cycle, studied the things, and literally fixed it within months,
Yeah.
like just
Incredible, isn't it?
naturally. Put her on natural things, some certain vitamins, boosting certain things, taking down certain things. And now she doesn't have to take anything. She's still around a 28, 29-day cycle every month.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and and they discovered that she had PCOS, possible a little bit of endometriosis and other stuff that really needed to be dealt with. So, because, he said, having a kid might not be the problem. Keeping it and not, losing it
Yep.
might be the problem for you. So they made her as healthy as possible so that we could have our kids and keep them. And so this stuff absolutely does work. And I have someone here, my next door neighbor, she was having endo. And I told her, I was like, don't go to secular doctors. They destroy you. They tear you apart. They've done it to my friends. Go to an NFP doctor. And I gave her numbers and everything. But because it's unfamiliar to people, they don't look it up. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't. This woman could not, and I'm not making this up, she couldn't sit or hold her kids for a year because they hacked her up in there so much.
Wow.
Whereas several of my friends were impossible cases. They could not have kids, according to doctors. But after the NFP surgeries and the NAPRO technology that they have, which most secular doctors don't know about, they can have kids. And it's been
Yeah.
seen as nothing but miraculous when in fact it's mostly just science that
Yep.
people just don't know.
Yep. And I mean, I had the same experience. We were struggling with primary infertility. We had a miscarriage. My cycles were all over the place. I found a doctor who could read my charts and knew how to balance my hormones, and do some different procedures. And we were able to conceive naturally. And I've never had an issue since. I've never had a miscarriage since. Not to say that it isn't possible, because, there are things that can happen, certainly, but it's a comfort to know that should we run into problems again, I have a doctor who will take it seriously, who won't make me have 3 miscarriages in a row, which is what secular doctors do before they'll even take even a peek at what's going on with your body. They'll take those things seriously right away and look at your cycle right away and order the hormone tests and do all the things they need to do to get to the bottom of it, because they take it very seriously that this impacts your entire life, your ability to have children, your overall health, just so many things, your marriage. And so I just, yeah, I really have to encourage people who think only of NFP for the child postponement aspect of it, and tend to think of it as Catholic birth control, that you're really, really wildly mistaken, and you're only considering one half of the story. So think a little bit more deeply about it. And it's based in science, and it's based in faith. If we were meant to be getting pregnant all the time, every time we had sex, women would be fertile all the time. God could have made us fertile all the time, but he didn't. He wrote this cycle into our bodies, which it tells us through our reason and our faith that God doesn't intend for every act of sex to lead in a child. That every time a man and woman come
Thank
together.
goodness.
Yeah. Thank goodness. And so it's just there's faith and there's reason to be seen in NFP. And it's St. Pope John Paul II did just an incredible thing for the church and for the world with his theology of the body, really spelling these things out for us, in much better ways than I can do here. But just give NFP a second thought if your knee-jerk reaction is, oh, it's Catholic birth control and we're open to life and we don't need that. And that's where, kind of more lay organizations like Natural Womanhood and where I work, and the various organizations that are teaching NFP, where we're being the salt and the light, and trying to communicate these truths to anyone and everyone that we can. And so, yeah, please check out whatever NFP organization, and how different ways that you can help them. A lot of them, you don't actually have to be trained to teach the method, but you can be kind of an ambassador for it at your church, at your parish, because you might be thinking, oh, I don't want to become an NFP instructor. That's a bridge too far. But for a lot of them, they have, you can sign up to be like an ambassador of sorts, and to give talks about it at your parish, and to kind of point people to the resources, because that's what we do at Natural Womanhood. We don't teach a particular method, but we point people to where they can find these methods talk about the different methods that exist, and the benefits for, that vary across the different ones. So, check us out at naturalwomanhood.org if you're wanting to dive deeper into the different methods and what might work for you.
Do you have any social media?
Yep, and we're at Natural Womanhood on Instagram and on Twitter as well. So, and I think Facebook too. Yeah, find us.
Great. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sharing this wisdom. We really appreciate it. And God bless you and your family.
You too, and I hope you feel better soon, Bryan. Thanks for having me despite not feeling well. This was great.
Yeah, it was great. I want to thank all you people for listening out there as well. Please share this with the world because the world needs to hear it. And we will try to break it down into more bite-sized, digestible clips as well. And just get it out there 2 and 3 times. Share it all because everyone needs to know the truth, which has set them free. And we've been so lied to by a contracepting, woman-destroying, woman-hurting culture.
Yep.
And, they say they promote women's health and women's freedom, and it's literally done the opposite to them and enslaved them. And we are about freeing them with the truth. So please share this with as many people as you can think of on all your social media platforms. If you want to support Natural Womanhood, you can check out their website. If you want to support Catholic Truth, see our description section below and follow us on social media. And if you would like a parish speaker, catholictruth.org. God bless you all. Thanks for watching.